Hi, friend. Thanks for joining me today on the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. I wanted to take a moment to give you a content warning about today's episode. We will be dealing with topics around suicide and self-harm. And if that's something that you would rather not listen to, or you have little people around with you, push pause and come back when you have headphones or you're by yourself.
Hello and welcome to the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. Rachael is a speaker, inspirational author, and an overcomer. As Rachael is walking through her own journey of grief, she's challenging others to persevere and overcome their own circumstances. Find out more at rachaelflick.com. Here now is your host, Rachael Flick.
Hi, friends. Welcome to this week's episode of the Hopecast. I'm so glad to have you here and just continue to invite you into this community of healing that is resilience and inspiration. And I wanted to tell you, I've started an account at buymeacoffee.com/Rachael Flick. And that's a way that you can continue to invest in this community and help to spread the message of hope and healing to people around the world. It was really cool. I was looking at my statistics, and there are people in Romania and Argentina and East Asia that are listening. And so when you invest in what we're doing here, you are literally sowing seeds globally. I also want to remind you that I've created the Hopecast to be a library of resource. And I get a lot of questions from you guys about what can I do in this situation? How can I help people who are grieving? What can I do for children? How should I step in? You know, I've got this challenging situation. And if you go into your podcast app or wherever you listen and you scroll through those episodes, I've done over 139 now to help you, to serve you, to support you. So please continue to go back and find this as an evergreen resource that you can use and that you can send to friends and family. I am so eager today to introduce you to Rachael Dozier Powell. She and I met at the Never Alone Widows Conference in Atlanta, Georgia. It's an amazing ministry to especially young widows, but to all widows. And they really focus on how they can serve in helping us heal through the greatest losses of our lives. And so some interesting things about Rachael. She is an inspirational writer, speaker, singer, and merchandise creator who's on a mission to reach people struggling with pain and hopelessness. After losing her young husband by suicide and then attempting herself, a widowed and remarried suicide survivor, she is also a bio, kinship, and stepmom, and a registered nurse and entrepreneur. Rachael founded her business Hope Speaker and has received many messages that her authentic and compassionate sharing has not only encouraged those in her reach, but has also prevented suicides. Her background in science, medicine, and mental health from both clinical training as well as personal experience and her late husband's journey give her expertise and insight into helping people who are suffering. Her story also involves navigating and healing through other struggles that enable her to be a voice of hope in the midst of pain. Her Christian faith is also a key part of her life and family. Other areas of insight include leaving abuse in the church, reconstructing faith after life-shattering tragedy, and the process of knowing God more deeply and experientially through suffering. Welcome, Rachael, to the Hopecast.
Thanks, Rach. I'm happy to be here with you.
Yes, it's so awesome. And for our listeners, we'll just say Rachael, Rachael, Rachael. We'll just go back and forth like we're echoing each other the whole time.
Rachel squared.
Yes, that's us. How are you doing today?
I'm hanging in there. Yeah, I apologize. My voice is a little bit off from a sinus infection that went into my lungs, but I'm feeling a lot better, and I'm really grateful for time with you here today.
Yeah, I'm so grateful too. And actually, I think about this quite a bit, that one of the things we experience as widows is just stress in our bodies and how that manifests, and sometimes in illnesses and injuries. And I think about everything that I went through with my surgery last year, but then I've been having an autoimmune reaction with hives. And so I'm taking all of these antihistamines, which dries out my voice as well. So we can be a little dry and scratchy together today.
Perfect.
Maybe Mike will make us sound better in the in the editing process.
If he can do that, more power to him.
Oh, they're magical. The editing is magical. So let's start with what is your late husband's name?
My late husband was Andre Quentin Dozier.
Andre.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's start a little bit with that as your framework starting point, and then I'd love to take you through to your current remarriage and blended family story.
Okay. Yeah. Do you want me to tell a little bit about meeting Andre, or?
Let's take you to the point. Kind of one of the things that you had mentioned was how to see signs, incoming thoughts of suicide. And so maybe take us to the point in your marriage where you can look and see some of those troubling signs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say in my journey with Andre, what I've found is even among the community of suicide widows that I know and that I'm a part of, is that can look very differently. That being widowed by suicide isn't a one size fits all either. There's people who have struggled with mental illness chronically or different things, and I've met a few that had a very messy and difficult and traumatic journey as I've had, because Andre was the most incredible person, just loved the Lord, loved people, so profoundly fruitful in his life of just 30 years. And over the last year of his life, he really declined into becoming someone else. And so that made things extremely confusing
Mm,
and almost crazy making to have someone who was so incredible and so loving and so humble and so teachable and in leadership, and then to go through this journey where he was having so many changes and struggles that was hard even for people to see from the outside, and what that was like to navigate from the inside as things
mm,
became even abusive in our marriage, and there was things going on behind the scenes that very few people saw. So that when Andre died by suicide, it was, I mean, to all of us, a complete and utter shock. Like, he would be the last person in the world you would ever think. I mean, he was so full of life. He was such a gifted evangelist. He touched so many people, but behind the scenes in that last year, the things that were going on, it was really felt like schizophrenic living, and it's only in hindsight with a lot of processing and counseling and healing that I've been able to see more clearly, because at the time it was like a landslide. You're just trying to hold
just trying to
everything
survive.
together.
Do you use that word therapeutically or like an analogy when you say schizophrenically?
No, I mean more of an analogy. I mean crazy making, the insanity of it. And part
Okay.
of what made it complicated too was, as I was seeing, as things were happening, and I had my own counselor, and I was starting to draw boundaries. Part of the crazy making was even within the realm of things that are supposed to be safe, like your marriage, like the church
Mm.
and leadership, right? You're supposed to have a covering of protection in your husband and in leadership.
Ideally, yes,
And
right?
right. And so when those things are undermining your safety, where my husband was not himself at all, and where I was crying out for help, and the response was, you submit to your husband, you submit to your husband, you submit to your
Mm.
husband, and even
Wow.
becoming like complicit in the cycle of abuse,
Wow.
to report things to him that I would be punished for if I talked with them outside of him. And so it was all really, really dark and really, really hard. So I mean, even within the realm of suicide widows, there's people who've had this struggle. There's people who struggled with depression. And then there's a few that I've met that had some kind of decline and involving things like abuse and a lot of anger. Even depression in men can manifest looking like anger, and
Mhm.
um, things that I just didn't know at the time, and that really complicated his loss and the processing of it, his anger at my boundaries and where I was trying to,
Mhm.
get us help that he didn't feel like we needed, which is really clear,
Mm.
that we did, but there was just so much there. So even within that realm, as far as the layers go, it gets extremely messy and dark, and it's hard. It was hard for everyone to know what was going on and what to do.
Mm.
And it's part of why I'm so passionate about speaking and sharing about these things now, because the more I live and the more people I connect with, the more I realize this has happened to people. It is
Mhm.
happening to people. And it's really a hard thing to talk about when those things are going on within our marriage and within the church, and what needs to change for people to be safe and to get the help that they need.
Hmm. Wow, I'm so sorry that that was the message that you received from the church. I am very familiar with that in my upbringing in IBLP of, the submit to your husband at all costs, regardless, and no matter what he's doing, he is the voice of God in your life, and just how incredibly destructive that is. And how it feels like Father God is mandating abuse in your life when the church is
Mhm.
giving you that message. So I'm
Mhm.
so sorry. When you look back now, how many years has it been since your loss?
Let's see, we are at 5.5 years now.
Okay. So with some 30,000-foot perspective, do you see anything that kind of led him into that massive decline?
Um, I there's so many unanswered questions. I
Mm.
don't know what led to that, but I do know there was things that came up along the way that I wish we all would have taken more seriously.
Hmm.
That I feel, I'm an advocate, a strong advocate for suicide prevention, and it needs to be taken so much more seriously, because we all feel like, oh, that's a sad thing that happens out there. Although more and more suicide is beginning to touch our lives through
Hmm.
people we know and love. But there's still, I really truly believed in my heart of hearts, even with all the craziness, with the time that he had mentioned suicide one time, I was like, he would never do that. Like, he would never do that. And that's what he said. There was one time, a couple of months before, and again, I had advocated for marriage. I had my own personal counseling. I was trying to have us asked him to be part of a recovery group. There's also was addiction underlying things, and that was a whole nother convoluted
Mm.
thing with the church of, what I was not allowed to have a voice or have boundaries in. But that
Mm.
leads people into this other place, because for whatever reason, like I said, he became someone completely else that was protecting the addiction and defending rather than like repenting and being remorseful, which was completely out of character for him.
Mm.
But one of the other things we were doing was marriage counseling, and he mentioned that, Andre he was a genius. He was so successful. He'd done his undergrad, master's, and PhD at Colorado State University in civil engineering. He was like 6 months
Mm.
into starting his own business that he'd always dreamed of. Andre wanted to He turned down a lot of other amazing job opportunities and income to continue to go through school. He wanted to bring clean water to people on a more global scale. And,
Mhm.
he was like 6 months into that, and things were starting to move. I mean, it was really amazing what he was starting to do. But he mentioned in that counseling session, he said, I've worked so hard for all of this stuff, and I don't really care about it
Mm.
anymore. I don't really know that it means anything. I don't know that I want to still be here or be living. And our marriage therapist at that time, he just took a pause, and he was like, do we need to talk about a safety plan? And Andre was like, no, no, like I'd never do that. I'm just hurt, and I'm really angry. And, and it
Hmm.
was the anger, even with all of the sessions we had, that was like the common thing is I'd sit there'd be so much anger. And then at some point, the marriage therapist would say, okay, is there a way that we can come back onto the road of some kind of healing? Or, restoration or resolution, and what can we do with
Mhm.
this? Like, I hear you, but that was all there was, was a pause and a question, and he was like, no, no, no.
He didn't want any solutions or to make any effort towards that.
He was stuck. He
Mm.
was stuck in pain and in anger, and again, I don't have all the answers as to why or what triggered. I don't know
Mhm.
if he got to the top of somewhere that he found it more empty than he was expecting. I know we had a lot of life stresses. There's probably, I mean, suicide is so multifactorial and so complex, but there was a lot of different dynamics, and a part of a big one where he got stuck was when the addiction was escalating. And I finally drew some boundaries of my own. I went to a specialized support group, and I had a counselor, and I had people giving input into like a safety plan. And he just got so fixated on, like, you cannot have these boundaries and tell me you will never, do anything remotely like drawing some of these lines, and it's sin and it's worldly schools of thought. And he would corner me.
Mm.
And it was like
Wow.
really getting out of control, tearing up books and journals, and just completely, like I said, not who he was at all, not who he was
Mm.
in the spirit. And it was just crazy making for me to try to navigate having to draw those boundaries, and again against what the church leadership at one point was saying, like,
Right.
you just submit, and I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Mm.
And so it was very complex. I don't know all the things that led to it, but I know trying to navigate it in the midst of everything, I truly was reaching for all the support that I could. But other than pastor, marriage counselor, some people in a group, again, that I'd asked him to, like, if we're going to work through this, you don't, he would say, you're forcing me, you're forcing. And I was like, I'm not forcing you. You have a choice, in getting help. But if we're going to rebuild trust and be able to make it through this, we need to get some help. But he was just stuck in these places that were completely uncharacteristic to him.
Mm.
And that, again, was, so some people, some family heard, which has made the grieving process so much more difficult and hard, because the
Yes.
people, what they saw was mostly normal. I mean, he was
Mhm.
getting more edgy and impatient and angry at work, which was out of character. But even, family and friends, most people saw on the outside that he was still joyful. He poured into the kids. He loved them. They gave
Mm.
him so much life. It was like this counselor, this pastor, and this group, that he was so angry and really had a lot of anger and blame toward me. So then when we lost him, and that was a whole nother level of guilt. Suicide guilt is already one thing. I mean, everybody feels like, what else could I've done? What was the last time I interacted with them? Could it have been different? Was there some way I could have reached out to them, something I could have done? But when you have someone who's angry and basically blaming you for drawing boundaries, for trying to get help, that added a whole different dimension of guilt, and feeling
Mm.
like it was my fault. That,
You felt like that.
yes, and
Wow.
there's different parts of it, even for me and my struggle with suicide, and when I attempted also, but that was part of it, was just like this overwhelming. I mean, I loved him so much that any thought that, like, it was my fault was unbearable.
Mm. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting when you share your story, I think, well, you invested so much in him and your marriage and trying to help him and, bring in resources and all of that. And so, I look at that and be like, you gave everything you had to helping him, but you still experienced that survivor's guilt.
Absolutely. And another complicating factor of that, which I unfortunately have found not uncommon with suicide widows, is the change with especially your late husband's family and
Mm.
friends and people are connected, because whether for whatever their reasons are, there can be guilt from them. Everybody's trying to deal with this grief and this loss, and so they look at you, especially when they
Yeah.
were angry at you, and it's like, what could you have done different? How was this your? And so when you're dealing with the outside pressure too or just the ways that it changes and you're not really part of the family anymore. I mean, it's just like, in different ways, loss upon loss upon loss upon
Yes.
loss, in widowhood. And so that was, yeah, it was the darkest years of my life. And that was how, even though I had lost him by suicide and knew like it doesn't solve anything, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't get rid of pain. You only pours it out onto the people that you love. Like I knew all these things. I was strong, like from the beginning, advocate for suicide prevention. I also came to this place of knowing what it's like for the pain to be so unbearable that you just feel like you can't keep doing it anymore. And it's almost like I've heard it described as, if a building was on fire and burning, where people have jumped to their deaths. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, who would ever do that? Who would ever jump from a height to their death? Like, what a horrible, awful thing. And it's like, but do you know what burning alive feels
Burning
like?
alive.
And it really was such a journey in my depths for me to find the Lord in the fire with me
Mm.
and to
Ooh.
make it through that, because there was no other way. He literally, I mean, I struggled with suicide for years and I came close many, many, many times. I mean, I lived at the place my husband passed away. I would walk barefoot. I would stay like overnight on the rocks, sleeping out
Mm.
there. And a lot of times it was very dangerous. But he literally intervened twice.
Mm.
That's why I'm here. And again, that's a whole nother host of questions. Why would you do that for me? Why didn't you do that? For him, there's no way I have all of the answers, but I know his faithfulness in the darkest depths. And there is this tension between
Yeah.
feeling so strong against suicide and feeling such empathy and understanding of what it's like to be in that place. It's something you feel physically, like a weight on you.
Yeah. Well, and the pain is so visceral,
Mm-hmm.
so powerful in your body and your soul. It just feels like, I don't know, you're in some kind of a meat grinder.
Mm-hmm.
The agony is terrible. And I know that I struggled with suicidal ideation after Micah was killed as well. And I remember sitting there holding a gun and just crying and being like, God, I can't do this anymore. Like, there's no way that I can continue to endure. Like, I can't do it. And he brought me a picture of Nick Vujicic, who is a man born without arms and legs. And I had been so captivated by his story and his joy in the midst of having such a significant disadvantage. And he's like, Rachel, if he can do it, you can do it. And it just broke me in that place. And I put the gun away. But I mean, I really do relate to how bad that pain can be, and that it feels like you've tried, right? You've tried everything. It's not like suicide was your first option,
Mm-hmm.
but feeling desperate to end the hurt that just has been so captivating for so long.
Yeah, especially for years. I mean, it was, as you know, and in widowhood and in all the things to navigate, it's not just like a day or a week, or it's like years and years. And so that the truth that it won't always be this way, like the holding out, wait and see what happens, like that verse in Ruth, wait, my daughter, and see what happens. Like I had someone lasered that into wood and I had that in front of me, but it's so hard to grasp when it's like, but I've been doing this for 700 and, however many days. And you're like,
Yeah.
yes, that becomes very hard to hold on to. And the support is critical. And how the Lord met me was just his grace, because
Mm-hmm.
his faithfulness is what I have seen through all of this. Like he carried us along when all I could do was lay on the floor and have these thoughts about ending my life and push some strawberries at my little ones to eat when I like felt like I couldn't even get up to make
Mm-hmm.
them a meal. It was just
Mm-hmm.
and the beautiful thing is that the Lord met me there. One of those times I was by where my husband had passed away, and it was like 3 a.m. And I was in this space, and the Lord gave me this vision. And I know this like wasn't my mind, because this wasn't at all the space. Like I said, I could hardly function that I was in. And he gave me this vision of me up on a stage speaking to people. It was like speaking life and speaking hope. And when I looked out like from the stage, there was all of these people in their own places where I was. And he told me, he said, you have to keep living. You have to show them how. I saw that there was all of these other people in these places, and that I needed to stay, and that I needed to help other people to stay. But for a lot of years, it was just simply, surviving myself, me and my kids.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just overcome emotionally by the anointing on your story. And I'm so grateful to the Father just to reach out to you in that place and to show you a hope in a future, even though you couldn't feel a hope in a future in that time. And, I resonate so much with that, like, wait and see, because I don't feel like I'm in the dredges of agony like I did for years. Like, I felt that heaviness lift and somewhere in like year 4.5. That was, something I carried with me everywhere I went, and sorrow was my companion. And so I get that feeling of people just who haven't lost someone have no concept, right? Like I got asked 6 months out by a reporter live on TV if I was feeling better now that it had been 6 months. And bless her heart, right? But I was like, no, I'm not even close to feeling better. Absolutely not. Even now, I'm like, Lord, I know that you've said you have a hope and a future and you have new dreams and plans, but I don't know that I necessarily see that yet, because it's just been about surviving one tragedy and trauma after another for the last 7 years. So I do relate to that suffering. Can you talk a little bit about kind of that complex bereavement, right? Where you had a relationship that was tumultuous and you were trying to institute boundaries and get support from other people, and you were being told the problem's actually with you and you need to adjust yourself as a wife, and that will reorient him as a husband. That was advice that I also received. But then after, like, you still have that agonizing loss. It's not like because your relationship was tumultuous that you're like, well, bye. But then maybe there is also a feeling of relief at times when you've had so much steady conflict.
Yeah, that's so complicated. Yeah, feeling guilt for having any relief. Definitely, because when you've been in a struggle, whether, I've heard from other widows whose husbands struggled with depression a long time, or who had attempted multiple times. And, there was not really I don't even know that I felt relief in getting out of the abuse, because it took me so long to process like what had actually happened. But I did feel relief from being under the addiction that had been part of our story all along. And that was really the one and only thing that I could grasp as like even a remotely positive thing, was like this thing that had been so wounding. And even that piece was very similar to when you're voiceless and powerless and you don't have the ability to draw boundaries, have a say over your own body, the sanctity of your marriage, your own basic needs and limits. It's crazy making to put people in that space, but that had been happening all along in the realm of the addiction, because it was always like, I remember it didn't make a difference, but I remember sitting with him and a pastor, years before, and saying, like, I was sobbing and I was like, I feel like a dog chained to a pole because I'm taking a beating and I can't get out. Like, I can't get out. I can't escape. I can't do anything to change. And I feel like I'm going to bite. Like, I can't keep doing that this way. But But again,
That's such a good analogy.
that was truly like clearly the vision that I had of what it felt like. And so what's interesting is like that is the insane thing is actually what we do to people in the name of marriage, in the name of, the church. There's organization, there is authority there's God-given roles and things that are meant to be beautiful, but never do those things trump an individual being safe or
Mm-hmm.
sane.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we flip, and
Come on, preach
somehow
it.
we do this where we flip, the victim of abuse or the one being wounded becomes the bad one, the divisive one, the disunifying one, the ungracious one, the disobedient one, for drawing lines, and we miss the heart of God for us as people, because nowhere
Right.
does God ever call us to be under the enemy's feet in the name of upholding an organization. Like even the
So
sanctity of
good.
marriage doesn't come before the individuals in it. If someone is not safe, if someone is unwell, like in the name of preserving the marriage, we put the burden on the one who's not leaving it to uphold it, was what I
Mm.
experienced. Like I
Wow.
stayed in it and I was faithful, but I carried the burden of just like going on with life every day like it didn't happen, like nothing happened,
Mm-hmm.
again and again and again and again. And again, as things escalated, like having boundary lines or not doing exactly what they were saying I needed to do and submitting. Or another thing that came up was at one point, my late husband wanted me to leave my jobs. He was isolating us. We were out of small group. We were
Mm.
out of this. There was times he wasn't attending church, which was, again, so completely not him. And I remember talking with the pastors and being like, I feel like the church is this ship out at sea. Like, I feel like he's let us out, me and all of our kids were on this life preserver, and we're going farther and farther and farther away. And I was like, and I can't even always see the church over the waves anymore. We're so out here in this storm. And it was always like, when he didn't want to go to small group, and I was like, maybe me and the kids will keep going because I feel like I need people. And it was like, you submit to your
Yeah.
husband, you submit to your husband, you submit to your husband. It's a busy season, and this is what he thinks, and this is what and so the crazy making of those things where we
Wow.
turn it on people is actually what's insane. Then we point fingers at them, and I had this, your reaction is extreme, you're reacting extreme, you are not stable, you're not, but you've been put in this place of not being able to be human for so
Mm.
long. And then we wonder why. Like, you have no voice, you have no power, you have no boundaries, and we're talking over a decade later, and then you wonder why people are at their end. Like, I can't do this anymore. Like, that's an extreme thing. What's
Yeah.
extreme is that we put people in those places to begin with. So it was all that had been part of the dynamic that I didn't see until later, when things really intensified, when I finally knew, like, the different forms of abuse and the cornering and the ripping things
Mm.
up and having this idea that things are worldly schools of thought. And I needed to admit I was in sin, and
Hmm.
driving 115 on I-25 until I would plug in my phone and play this certain passage of scripture that he wanted me to know, why I had no grounds ever to even think about separating. It was just like these crazy things
Wow.
where I was like, okay,
I'm so
this has to
sorry.
stop, even if nobody else is agreeing with me. And I think for so long, that was really what it was. For so long, I waited for someone else to tell me that I had a voice. I waited for so long for the pastors to say, yeah, like, you can have some boundaries, you can have some sanity, you can have some safety. I was
Yeah.
waiting for other people to fight for me. I was waiting for other
Yeah.
people to say it was okay. And I wanted so much to be good, and to fit in the group. And I did suffer, a loss of belonging from
Mm.
going against what they said, which was what I had feared. I had always fit, I had always been under my husband. We had been in leadership. We had all of our ducks in a row. And so when you come to this place where things started to fall apart, and you lose belonging, and you lose respect, and you just keep losing everything. I had to find a place with the Lord to know where it was okay to have a voice. And He really gave me that and has continued to,
Yeah.
because it's been a long time, coming before I even spoke about any of these things. I held all of this inside and in silence for so long because
Yeah.
being afraid. Mm-hmm.
Wow, what an amazing interview. I hate to interrupt this, but I have to cut in for time and cut this interview into part 1 in anticipation of next week with Rachael Dozier Powell. If you want to get in touch with her, you can find her here.
Yeah, you can feel free to go to hopespeaker.com. And that's the website there where you can connect with me and the Hope Library resource library that I have that is being built up with more and more resources and value for you. And Hope Speaker is also on Facebook and Hope_Speaker on Instagram as well. I forgot to mention one other resource that I have created specifically for folks who have been widowed recently or know someone who has, is I took what I've went through and the messiness of losing Andre and researched as well and created a newly widowed checklist for people who are going in the throes of that, things to think about in an order that is good to do them in, because I made some mistakes and got locked out of credit cards and had a bunch of problems. So anyway, some things to think about that would be a blessing. If you are newly widowed or know someone who is, you just simply go to newlywidowedchecklist.com and you can get that resource or pass that along to someone as well.
Friends, thanks so much for listening to the Hopecast. I was glad to have you in this conversation. It was really powerful. If it touched you or ministered to you in any way, would you share it with a friend? And would you rate, review, and subscribe to the Hopecast? That allows me to continue to share the message of hope and inspiration around the world. Everybody, this is the Hopecast with Rachael Flick.
You've been listening to the Hopecast with Rachael Flick. To find out more, go to rachaelflick.com. While you're there, you can book Rachael for your next speaking engagement. Her inspiring message will be sure to engage and touch the heart of your audience at your next conference, church event, or business function. Go to rachaelflick.com to book her today. While you're online, you can discover more information about all of the platforms that this podcast is on. Also, be sure to click on the social media icons at the top of the page, and you will be directed to Rachael's social media sites. If you listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, we would appreciate if you would subscribe and leave us a review. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time for another edition of the Hopecast with Rachael Flick.